Welcome back to Boring Build Friday. Today we have a new build. It's a 2018 Ram Promaster City SLT. A lot of people had asked me if I would do a Ram because I'd done so many GM and Fords. Well, here you go. Oh, you meant a pickup? Well, you should have been more specific, because now we're stuck with a Ram Promaster City. Now this isn't the first Promaster City I've ever done. I actually did one before, and there's a video up there if you want to check it out. But when I did that, it was cheaper for me to buy a parts car than it was to buy all the parts at the time. So I have the leftover parts that I'm going to use on this, which is why I bought this one. Use up the rest of my parts. Now when I'm splitting the cost of the parts car between two cars, I make more money, which is always a good thing. So that's what enticed me to buy this. Now my parts car only had 13,000 miles on it, so there's a lot of good stuff on it. I did use most of the body parts on that other build, but I still have some left over, and I'm definitely going to need it on this one. And a lot of little odds and ends, which will really end up saving me. So let's take a better look and see exactly what's wrong with this thing. So I picked this little guy up in Vermont, and it would have been a great time to charge it on the way back, but it was pretty cold up there, and I didn't feel like messing with it after I got it loaded, so we drove it back here without charging the battery. So we're going to have to see if the battery is dead now. Of course. Did you really expect it to not be? Uh-oh. Somebody's been here before. I don't think this battery's going to hold a charge. So, somebody's definitely had this thing apart, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. Got a free chain. And maybe I'll tear it apart and see what they found. So I don't have to worry about trying to put this all back together because I have that 13,000 mile engine out of our parts car that I can just throw in here as an assembly. So that's what I'm going to do. Makes it pretty easy to sort out this person's mess. However, there was another somebody involved and I have to sort out their mess. That's going to be a little bit more work. So changing an engine is pretty easy, but nothing in life is ever easy. At least not for me. So, we got some complications to our job here. Now if I had to speculate on how this scenario went down, and I'm about to, here's how it goes. Now this van was owned by a leasing company that leases vehicles to smaller companies. So they leased it out to this company, they called them up and said, hey, our van broke down. The leasing company brought it in, took it apart, decided it needed an engine, and wrote it off, because to them it wasn't worth fixing. So, they sent it to the auction. On the way to the auction, this tire went flat. Now the tow truck driver didn't stop. He just kept going. Either because he didn't notice or didn't care. I'm going to go with didn't care. Because I don't think it would be hard to notice the fact that there was debris flying everywhere, sparks had to be flying out of here, and it had to be making a lot of noise. He drove it until there was literally no wheel left. The wheel liner is gone. We got some brake lines that are smashed, a shock that's tore up. Of course, no tire, wheel cover, and there's a lot of holes in the wheel well. We're going to have to patch some metal and maybe replace some parts. It's probably going to take me more time to fix this than it will to fix the actual problem that we started with. But I have all these parts, so I'll save a few bucks. So now in the tow truck driver's defense, maybe he didn't understand this little feat of engineering here. It's a compressor with a can of sealant. You plug it into the cigarette lighter, you put the other end on the valve stem, which should be right about here, and you fill up the tire. Now, if the tire has any more than a small nail in it, it renders this completely useless. So when the tire doesn't even exist, I can't imagine this is really any good at all. So, if only there were another solution we could come up with that wouldn't leave us stranded on the side of the road. Like maybe a wheel with a tire already mounted on it that we could store in the vehicle or even under the vehicle in case we had a flat that couldn't be repaired. Like a spare tire. I can't believe no one's ever thought of that. But they thought of this. Although this does have a good use. adding to the pile. This is a fancy one, and it actually does have a spare, but most of them don't. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, they do that for weight savings. Well, then why, when you pay more money, are they happy to throw a spare in here? They're doing it because they're cheap. Of course, nowadays, most of those same people that want to tell me why they're doing it probably can't even change a tire, so I guess it doesn't really matter if they had one or not. But for those of us that can change a tire, it's so much easier to have one. Than to be sitting on the side of the road waiting for a tow truck. Oh yeah, look away, OSHA. It's about to get sketchy. I think we can plug it. In the pile. So we had to go with sketchy because we had to put it right here in order to lift it up. That was the only thing I could get the jack under because it was sitting down so low. Once we got up in the air, we didn't work underneath it. We were able to get the jack standing under it so I could reposition the jack into a place where I could lift it up properly and get it high enough that I could put the spare tire on. So that's what we're going to do. Now, before I do that, let's take a look at how much damage a shredding tire will do to a car. So we got a brake line here. It's all smashed. We're going to have to replace that. And a shock that's all tore up. A wheel liner that doesn't really exist anymore. Some ABS wires here that are either torn or those new Bluetooth ones. So we're going to have to replace those. And there's a few new inspection ports. Yep, that's the inside of the truck. Van, go-kart, whatever you want to call it. I think I'll call it all of them. So we're gonna have to change all that stuff. I do have most of it from my parts car, so it's not too bad. Well, there is a little extra labor involved. Probably have more labor in painting this and replacing those wheel wells than I do in changing the engine. Almost forgot the wheel cover. So other than our body damage in the back and our bad engine, the rest of it's pretty straightforward. Hopefully the transmission is good. I mean, we're driving until the engine blew up, so we'll find out. Let's take a look at the inside, see what that looks like. So it's not pretty in here. It looks like this van was driven by the same person that used to own our RAV4. My detail guy's gonna love me. Look at all that deliciousness. Looks like they might have had satellite radio, drilled some holes. I might end up changing that entire shelf up there, because I do have a spare, but I'm not sure if mine's any good, because my car was hit pretty hard. Hey, spare parts. Some assembly required. This is the only part that I was really worried about, the catalytic converter, because I'd already sold my one off the parts car, and they're not cheap. Everything else, I don't really care about. I'm going to have all that stuff. The head's underneath there somewhere. Valve cover. Wheel liner. We have a wheel cover. Got our jack. And our tools. Our air box and intake tube. That little screen there, that's aftermarket. Just adds to the value of the vehicle. Same with these racks back here. Look at that. Got a tape measure. Sorry. Sorry, rest of the world, it's in freedom units. This rack's pretty nice. It does slide out. Get everything, and you can adjust the height all the way up. Of course, I'm going to have to take it all out of there in order to fix our inspection ports. There's another inspection port back here, all the way around that wheel well. So in order to get that out of there, I'm going to have to take this out. So I might sell it separately from the van. There's actually 2 of these engine covers. So I got spare parts on top of spare parts. So this one's pretty fancy. Does have a backup camera, parking sensors, has navigation. Believe it or not, this thing was $29,000 brand new. I did find the window sticker in it. Contractors seem to like these things because they do get decent gas mileage. There's plenty of room in there. You are going to need a door panel. Not sure what they did here, but it's supposed to have a cover. I guess they got hungry. Can't wait to find out what's under there. Jimmy Hoffa. This thing's never seen a vacuum in its life. Here's that other engine cover. Guess we get to decide if we want one that has red letters or silver letters. Yeah, something that plugs into the OBD2 port. Probably for vehicle tracking. Well, let's go exploring and find out. Didn't have to go far. Geotab. Yep, that's for vehicle tracking. Looks like this is just an extension cord. It's got the same connector on it. So this just extends it so they can hide this up underneath the dash. Got a numbered zip tie on it so that they know if anyone's messed with it. Ha! Apparently it didn't do any good because I can take it off and put it back together. You can get all the data off of it. Interesting. In the pile. Okay, Queen Freaks, it's your time to shine. Chicken bones. We'll leave the rest for the detail guy. We know how this goes. So the afternoon crew showed up so that we have some power to get this thing off the trailer. That need a little bit more power. What a trooper. It's like 0 degrees outside. Yes, all that creaking is the trailer. It's pretty cold. The boards are actually frozen together. So when they build these, just like most new cars, the engine and trans, the whole drivetrain, comes in from the bottom. And while I don't think I'll have too much of a problem just getting the block out of the top, I think I'm gonna have a real problem putting the assembly back in. So I'm gonna take everything out the bottom. It's better than taking the block out and then trying to put the new one in and running into problems and then having to do all the work anyway. So we're just gonna do all the work first. Will the engine fit in the top? The world may never know. Unless somebody else has tried it. So we'll unload all of our presents. See what we have and what we don't have. And what we have extra of. In the pile. And there's our pile of parts. An engine takes up a lot more space when you take it all apart. So some of it we might need to use. The rest of it stays in the pile. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull the trans drain plug out, see what the fluid looks like. If there's any indication that it might need a transmission, I want to change it now. If everything looks good, we'll continue on and hope for the best. Like I said, they were driving it around, so chances are there's nothing wrong with it. We'll unbolt this brace underneath the exhaust. I will unbolt the exhaust. The muffler goes up above the rear suspension, so we have to separate it to get it down. Slide it out of its rubber hangers. And we'll have a gnome give us a hand. Just kind of twist it until it slides out. He's pulling on it, holding a little tension. Now we can unbolt the inspection cover underneath, and we'll be able to see the torque converter bolts. Unbolt them, we'll spin the motor over. I just have a socket on the crank, and I'm just spinning it over by hand. Spins pretty easy with no head on it, and no oil pan and oil pump. So there's 6 bolts total. You have to turn it 3 times because you can get to 2 each time. Now we'll take the bolts out that hold the trans to the engine. All those little numbers are so I know where they go, because they are all different lengths and I don't want to forget which ones go where. It takes a few seconds to label it. It takes a few minutes to figure it out otherwise. Now we can pull our snow tires off. This one's stuck. Just give it a little kick. I hate lug bolts. We'll unbolt this wheel. Kick it off of there. And pull our tire off. Now we can unbolt the splash guard from the bumper. Somebody's been here before. That is not the right bolt. Couple bolts across the bottom for the bumper. Pull the bumper out of the brackets on the side. Just wiggle and pull. Couple bolts across the top. And the cover's ready to come off. You can tell this van is a fancy one. The cheap ones have the Fisher-Price textured plastic bumpers. Now we have to remove this baffle. It's riveted on, but it's riveted to a bracket that's bolted on. So if you reach back there, you can get that bracket off without having to replace the rivet. So that's what I'm trying to do.
There's one plastic rivet in the top. You can pull it down. And then the power steering cooler lines clip in on the back, so we just have to unclip them. Pull that baffle out of there. And we can unbolt the sway bar link from the strut. Got a pair of vice grips on the inside of the link so it doesn't spin. We can unbolt the tie rod end. Tap the knuckle to get it out of there. And we'll unbolt the ABS wire. Wiggle the sensor out. It's a little rusty. Got to be careful. Takes a little patience not to break this. These ABS sensor removal pliers are available in my Amazon store, but for some reason they incorrectly labeled them as trim clip pliers. Get a better grip on it so we don't snap it off there. It's starting to move. Or break, one or the other. I don't want to find out. So we're going on to plan B. We're going to leave that sensor in the knuckle. We're just going to take the rest of the wire off, which is much easier. I don't know why that wasn't plan A. Now we can unbolt the caliper and bracket, and then disconnect the brake pad sensor. Push the caliper in by twisting it. We'll hang our bungee cord end on the spring and hang the caliper on that. Now we can unbolt our strut from our knuckle. Pop our bolts out of there and separate the two. We can pull this lower support out. There's 4 bolts in the front and 2 that go into the subframe. That just slides out the side. We can unbolt our compressor now. I'm going to leave the lines and everything connected so I don't have to discharge the AC. We'll just set it off to the side, bungee cord it up out of the way, unplug the compressor clutch, and now we're on the other side. Take the nut off the tie rod end, knock it loose, couple hits on the knuckle, not on the tie rod end, definitely not in the threads. Unbolt the brake caliper and set it off to the side. Get our sway bar link out. We'll remove the brake pad sensor wire because removing wheels to check brake pad wear is for peasants. Then disconnect our ABS wire. We're going to leave the ABS sensor in the knuckle because apparently that's the better way. And we can unbolt our strut. Tap the bolts out of there. Unbolt that brace. I bet you thought that broke. Yeah, me too. Slide that out. And disconnect our fuel pressure sensor. That harness goes with the engine. Now we can disconnect our heater hoses. I like these European style clamps. When they work, they're great. These are pretty new, so they still work. Just pull that little clip up and twist them off. Put them back on. Just push the clip in and push the hose back on. I'll pull the shift cable out. There's a bracket in the back that holds it down. Also holds a wiring harness. Now we'll disconnect the end of the shift cable. And we'll pull the shift cable out of the other bracket. Pull the collar back and lift it up. To disconnect the end of the shift cable, it's got a little button in it. So you just push down on the button and lift up on the cable. Pretty slick. I'll pull that shift cable out of the way. We'll unbolt the wiring harness to the transmission. Then we'll unplug the transmission. There's a little collar on the plug. You just rotate it and lift up on the plug at the same time. It disconnects it. And we'll set that mess off to the side. disconnect our power wire to the starter. That harness is going with the engine. Put the nut back on so I don't forget it, because I'm old and I forget things. Unbolt the ground wire from the side of the trans. And we'll unbolt the rack and pinion. There's a nut up on the top. And the bolt runs all the way through. Try not to drop it. I'm not in the mood for hide and seek today. Pull the bolt out. Do the same thing on the passenger side. Make sure our rack and pinion is free. We're going to bungee cord that out of the way. Just leave it in the van. Now we can pull a few bolts out of the subframe. We'll leave 2 of them in there. Unbolt the trans mount. And we'll unbolt the engine mount. Free chain. And some free nuts. What a deal. Now we'll unbolt the last 2 bolts of the subframe. These I can't quite get to, so I have to take them off with a wrench. If you don't have an inverted Torx wrench, pretty much any wrench will do. You just have to find one that fits. So our engine should be ready to come out. We'll start lifting it up. Little by little, make sure nothing's getting snagged. Everything looks good. This video should be sponsored by Bungee Cord, since everything I didn't want to remove is now suspended by them. It saves time to cheat a little bit.
So that's as far as we're going to go today. Next time we come back, we'll swap everything over on our engine and we'll get it back in the van. See if it runs. Well, it used to run. Hopefully it runs in this van. We'll find out. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.